Hey everyone, it's been a while. We're in August of 2021 at this point. Haven't put up a video in a while. As I probably mentioned before, I hate editing, and with doing chemo and stuff, I just haven't been feeling that well. And so stuff that I don't like doing tends to not get done. Anyway, we're going to try and film something here that's maybe one or two takes. Won't take me any time to throw it together. Probably won't be titles and stuff on it. It's just going to be a video. So let me bring you up to date on what's been going on. Me personally, I'm in month 6 of chemo. We'll be done at the end of this month. Prognosis is good so far. They did a PET scan a month or so ago, and found nothing. So at this point, everything's looking good. Hopefully I'll get done with the chemo here in the next 3 weeks and start feeling better so I can get more done. I'm trying to get as much stuff done as I can outside before the weather turns bad, and it makes it, too cold to work out here. I know it doesn't get that cold in Washington. I'm a wimp, but it is what it is. So let me take you out and show you some of what's been going on here. So we'll start with the Beetle. As you can see, I built a chassis stand. So the little pile of stuff there is stuff I cut off of it last weekend, off of the Beetle, I should say, not the chassis cart. So you can see I built a chassis cart that you can level out. That way, when I work on things, I can make them level to everything else. Makes my life a little simpler. Ground down a little bit. Here's some more rust. This car is just. That's probably good that I'm cutting a lot of it away. This is me fitting in the front subframe. As you can see, I've cut a bunch of this out. Some more needs to be cut out still. It's in the correct position front to back, side to side, but it needs to go up about 2 inches, which is going to require cutting out a bunch of that right there. As you can kind of see the lower control arm, the rear mount for it. Basically right now, if it was 2 inches higher, the lower control arm would be going right through the body. So that's all got to get cut out so that I can move the whole thing up and be able to move control arms, have some suspension travel is not a bad thing on track cars. Let's see. Bring it in from the side here. You can kind of see I'm going to have to take a little bit more over the top of that and probably cut back in here, because there'll be a chassis tube that comes out here and attaches to that. I may be able to sneak it inside here because I'm planning to offset the mounts to try and equalize the difference between the front and rear chassis tubes that go to the front and rear subframes. You can see inside here, if I were not going with a center seating position on this car, it would be kind of difficult to put pedals in. I will be swapping out this stock Miata subframe for a tubular one. They take up quite a bit less space. It doesn't have mounts on it for the engine and so forth that I don't need. So that's $700 or $800 that hasn't been spent yet, because I can put the chassis together without having that in place. It mounts to all the same stock places on a Miata. So if it fits the stock subframe, it fits the tubular one too. In the rear, I haven't gotten really started with that yet. I cut out the stuff that you guys have seen cut out before, I suspect. But there'll be a little bit more cutting here in the back, mostly the lower part of the firewall, off to the sides especially. Maybe some higher cuts. We'll see where the roll cage ends up once that part of the chassis is in. But that's kind of what's going on with the Beetle right at the moment. Let's take a walk inside. And yes, I know, I have to empty the garbage can. So we have a new project. This engine that you just saw is part of it. And here it is. This is a low cost. It's a Lotus Super 7 replica. And I bought somebody's partially completed project. I started one of these in 2003. I bought a chassis and had it about 75 to 80% completed. Then I went to work for the race shop, and the 2 restoration shops I'd worked in prior to that, both of them were happy to have it in the shop, and I just worked on it after hours. And it kind of, to them, it sort of showcased what a person could do. The race shop I worked in wanted nothing to do with it because the owner of the place is a snob. Poo-poos anything that's not $100,000, you know, he's that guy. Anyway, and there's actually a funny story about him being that guy as well, but that'll have to wait for later. So this is basically, you're going to use Miata front uprights with fabricated upper arms, which I actually have already, at least the upper arms. The lower ones that they bought were really ugly, so they're going to get replaced. It's using the entire Miata rear subframe and back, which isn't a bad deal. Gives you known geometry that works. It's a little heavier than just building a tube section, but this car shouldn't be more than 1,500 pounds, so really it's not going to be bad. Plus it's going to add some weight to the back of the car, which isn't a bad thing. Engine and transmission wise, when I bought this, I paid a couple of grand for it, which is actually less than you can buy the Miata parts for at this point. They've just gone crazy the last year or so. So it's a 1994 Miata drivetrain. So I've got the transax or transmission, all the extra stuff I took off the engine when I got it, and then I've cleaned and repainted the engine, so it's pretty now. This will be going away for a remote mount for the, because that's a pain in the ass to get to underneath the intake manifold. And that's what's going on there. So what else has been going on other than building that chassis stand, which took quite a bit of my time? Had to fix the air compressor. So word to the wise, if you buy one of these, and like this one was when I got it, they were running it off the pressure switch, which is pretty marginal on a 5-horse motor. You really should have a motor starter on it. So when I got it, I had to put a new motor on it. And I said, oh, I'm not running it off the pressure switch. But I was cheap, and I bought Chinese crap. Pressure switch and the motor starter both. Probably cost me, I don't know, 75 bucks for the whole thing. Well, we woke up about a month ago to this thing running continuously. Get downstairs here, and the bypass valves were both blowing off. Both the one on the cylinder head and the one on the tank were blowing off. Fortunately, keeping it at a pressure where the tank wouldn't explode. And so a little investigation found that the contacts in the motor starter had welded themselves shut. So I thought, okay. I had already ordered a pressure switch thinking it was the pressure switch before I did any, you know, I did the cardinal sin of mechanics, and I shotgunned something, and it turned out that it was the motor starter contacts, which is what I thought. Well, I put the new motor starter on. This is a Square D, good US brand, and it ran instantly, and it was fine until that second restart. And one of the things that this thing had been doing kind of on and off, on hot restarts, it would act like it was like the contacts were bouncing on and off. And it only did it once in a while. Well, I happened to have the pressure switch, the old Chinese pressure switch, had the cover off of it, and it started doing it again. Turned out, like I said, I had the cover off the pressure switch, and the pressure switch was bouncing, causing the motor starter, of course, to bounce, and which is probably the single fastest way to weld the contacts together is to slap them together really quickly like that, on and off and on and off. They're just not designed for that sort of thing. So replace this pressure switch with the Square D one that I already had, and it's been running flawlessly ever since. So I'm pretty happy for that. It's a great compressor. It's just the control electronics. And then, speaking of control electronics, up here on the wall here, you can see there's a small box, this gray box up on the wall. That goes to my well. Our well's a little bit interesting. It feeds the house here and the house next door, because the same guy used to own both properties before we bought this house from him. And the well feeds into a 1,500-gallon cistern, which feeds the pressure tank and the two houses. And we have no water the other day. And looking into it, they just did a bunch of really bad wiring when they installed that big tank back there. The float switches were wired internally to the tank, or I should say the connections were internal to the tank, and it was just a nightmare. So what it ended up doing was frying that control box up there. So I replaced the control box, and it still didn't want to work because the wiring inside the tank was fried too. I mean, like inches of bare wire inside the water tank. It's pretty clever. So we had a guy out, well guy out, and fixed that part of it. I put on the new pressure switch, or the actually not a pressure switch, but the control box, and all is well. We have water again, which you can probably, maybe you can hear it, I don't know. It's running right now. Anyway, let's see. And then the machine area is a complete mess. I have been doing a whole bunch of machine work to build the stands for that pressure, or the pressure tank. Got pressure tank on the brain. I built the standoffs for the chassis table, and this is the mess that made. Some mess on the lathe too. I got to get in here and do a cleanup day at some point and just knock all this out because it's just everywhere. And of course, your shoes pick it up and track it around. But anyway, that's kind of what's going on down here. So that's all for now. I'm going to sign off and keep you updated. Like I said, if you're interested, I do a lot more Instagram than I do YouTube. It's WIWT Fab, same as it is here. Anyway, thanks a lot. So this, you'll remember, is the low cost that I purchased back in March. And you can see the last time you saw this, it was a bare chassis with nothing added. And now I've got some bodywork that's probably not going to stay. They don't fit very well. I have to modify both of them, and I can buy pieces that actually fit already. So I'll do that. But I have got the engine and transmission sitting in the proper place. So I can build mounts. From looking at this, the guy that I bought this from said that he was going to have the engine, the bottom of the oil pan, hang out 1 inch on a 5.5 inch ride height. So it's got plenty of room underneath when it's at ride height. But looking at this, you can see that, yeah, those stock engine mounts are not going to work. So we'll be coming up with something new there. I've got the pedals sitting where they need to go. The seats are right now, they're just sitting at the very back, but I've been looking at this, trying to figure out where to put the center tunnel, which is one of the reasons why this has to go in, is because I can't build mounts without the center tunnel in place, or at least the bottom portion of it. But I want to make sure both seats fit in, and they do, barely, but they do. Yesterday evening, I wrestled this differential into place. Found out that to do that, it won't go in from the top. There is no way to make it go in from the top. It does not fit. You have to take this off, and it's this and these two bars on either side here. You have to take that off and then unbolt the entire chassis from the table. And you can see that I've got it screwed down there and over there and here and here and here and up here, and same down the other side. I do that so that when I tack weld things in, the chassis doesn't warp. But it's a little annoying because I've set it up on the table center lines. As you can probably see here, I've got a mark on there, and it's a little bit of parallax, but it's dead centered on the table, both front and rear. So you can see, like I said, that everything's sitting here ready. This side, you could almost make that mount work, but still it's too close. I'm going to have to make something up. And you can see why this bodywork may not get used. I have to basically split it in half and make it wide enough. And I'm not really that interested in doing that much bodywork, so we'll see what happens.